the women has ovaries, blah blah blah, and we're like, wow, it really looks so weird. It looks like a Taurus head or something. There's a lot of things a woman would have to prepare, right? Going to the bathroom. Versus us guys, where if you bring a tissue paper, it only means you're gonna take a dump. Guys, I'm sad. I failed my math exam, 6/10. That's not our thing. The most emotional is when we're in a bus and we're all singing. Hi,
Hi,
Ines.
Justin. Even though we met each other in college, we both came from same-sex schools, and I wanted to talk a bit more about our high school experiences. So I think
Mhm.
this would be a good opportunity for both of us to understand more what it's like in an all-boys school. And I can share some thoughts as well from my experiences in an all-girls school.
It's interesting that I get to share at least a conversation with someone about these things, right? Well, what I liked about growing up in a same-sex school was that growing up, kasi I was a little awkward. So being surrounded by people the same gender and the same age helped me become more comfortable going to school. I didn't have those thoughts of how to approach the other gender, especially when you're a young guy and going through puberty. You could really focus on either your school or enjoying your time as a guy, like just playing sports with your friends, or I just want to play video games. And I'm sure 80% of the other people surrounding me loves the same thing I do. So it's not very difficult for me to just approach anybody, right? Versus if there was another gender in my school, I would have been a little bit more awkward maybe. So that's what I really liked about growing up with the same sex. I just feel more at home at least.
You mentioned a lot that feeling of comfortability. I think even though the case may be different, it would be the same for you guys. It's doing things like sports and video games. I think what I like about being in an all-girls school is that you're comfortable talking about your feelings more with each other. You feel that sense of like sisterhood. And I think because there aren't any guys in your school, you're taught to play other roles also. You learn to love math and science because someone has to represent that field in your school. When we have plays of like Romeo and Juliet, someone has to play the Romeo too, and someone has to play the Juliet. So you're taught to play manlier roles, and that's seen as something that's okay or cool. So I think there's like that level of comfortability and exposure that you get from being in an all-girls school.
Yeah, that's super true. I think I can relate with your sisterhood that you mentioned, because we, at least kami, we do have our brotherhood as well. It's very strong. Until today, we always reminisce about high school or grade school, about the things we used to do, and I miss those days where we could just do this, do that, and maybe it's our subtle way of trying to tap into our emotions as men.
And I guess with that kind of upbringing where you're only surrounded with the same sex, were there any issues you feel that persisted in a same-sex school?
There were any issues that I've experienced because as men, right, and we're young, there may be moments where we feel that being a little aggressive is normal. Maybe because we watch a ton of sports, things can get a little rowdy. We're running and playing tag. It gets a little rough where we're pulling on each other's polos. Or I'm playing basketball. I sprain my finger. I go to the infirmary. 10 minutes later, I'm back in the court thinking like I'm a hero. Like I injured myself, but I'm back. So these are the feelings that persisted at least with me, where showing my physical weakness is also a sign of overall weakness. That's why getting injured and then crying about it isn't something that we don't like to share. And maybe because of that, growing up all the way, maybe until high school, we still have those carry-on feelings of I don't want to show any sign of weakness to each other because I'm a man. I'm not a young boy. Everyone just wants to man each other up versus trying to talk about it. Well, I mean, this is just coming from my experience because other guys could be different. There's this sense of I'd rather not speak up. It's harder to express your opinions on more serious matters back in the day. We just want to have fun. This is high school. This is like my family. And it's the time to really let go without really thinking of any consequences. As long as I still do not mess up my life, I can't get into a proper college. So that was the mindset of at least I feel a lot of people. I'm one example of that where all I could think about was my training after school. That's how I felt. And it made me not want to participate in any serious discussion in classroom. All I could think about was anything physical because, I wanted to be an athlete, a professional athlete. I feel like speaking up in general about serious topics isn't something that we're known to do unless you're running for like SC president or something, right? Or having a club. In front of a lot of people, it's difficult for, at least for me, to speak up. But if it's in a like one-on-one, or how they say it, bro to bro, it's a lot easier to talk about the emotions, really. So coming from an all-boys school, I know that we do have the emotional capacity to discuss certain matters where it's really deep, where it's really sensitive. It's really got to be in a close-knit group where I trust you, you trust me. We have a code. Whatever we speak here doesn't come out of this room. That's usually where the emotional maturity happens, I'd say, when it comes to an all-guys school. Then a big emotional support group where you ask like 10 people. Our most interaction with women were actually in a tutor house. I feel like that actually helped us respect other women more. When you're inside school, everyone's just being themselves. But when you're in a tutor house, people are a bit more quiet. They seem more tame. So I can see that they still know how to act proper in front of other genders, or at least they're trying to figure it out.
I think very interesting to see how just that simple exposure, right, with someone from the opposite sex can like allow someone to see things differently or be more considerate about how they're acting.
Yeah, in an all-boys school, going into high school, when you're in high school, it's like a mystery box, diba? You just want to open it. Like, I'm so curious of that gender. Kami, in our high school, we had a lot of like all-boys school and all-girls school interaction. We had these stories. That's where we have to discover how to communicate talaga to the opposite sex. Which is good kasi you start researching or you start asking each other, okay, what can we not do? What can we do? It's almost like a brotherhood then to us now. Okay, we're doing this together. We're gonna learn to make them like us together. So it's also funny like that. Diba? That's another thing I enjoyed to a same-sex school where we're all going into the unknown talaga together. Not just for school, but even in our personal life. And it's very funny when we messed up. That's where we even talk about our feelings more. Why did I say that? Why did I do this?
Well, I feel like though in high school, when you kind of all grow up, you all kind of delve into the unknown together. It's just more of maybe in the same sex school, because you're with someone from the same gender, it becomes more comfortable because you feel like there's this level of understanding that someone from the same sex can give that maybe a female will give a different perspective to.
Yeah, it's like having a safety net, where if I fail, I'll just step back and I'm with my guys again. Guys, I messed up. It's okay, we got you. There wasn't a lot of teaching on what's the best way to treat women, or what do they do that's normal, that's not what we do. Kasi a lot of our studies were mainly about like math, science, you name it, the normal subject.
There's this hot topic also right now on the whole concept of like bullying and toxic masculinity. And I guess like what's your experience on that?
Bullying and the toxic masculinity, at least from my eyes, in our school, bullying can be in the form of, it's still physical and also verbal. That's how we did it back in the days of school. It's either you tell the guy he's dumb, or you tell him now why is he doing these things, right? And you shove him a bit. When it comes to toxic masculinity, right? Like other people in my school would call on their guy like, "Oy, bakla," parang ganon. So maybe at times that is our way of condemning someone by saying he's feminine, or at least my experience. I don't want to generalize. They may have experienced it differently, but be acting in a certain way or being weak, the guy could just say, "Nah, you're being gay." Showing signs of weakness equates to being a little bit feminine. That might be one of the more general cases. I'm sure this has happened in other schools as well. When I spoke with my friends, I'm not sure if it's more prevalent in their school or my school, but it does happen in our school.
It seems right in wanting to show that you're like the best man or the best person out there. It has a lot to do with shaming the other person, right? Like, we tend to shame someone if they don't reach certain qualities about what it means to be a man. And that's how it affects you guys. You also had like this issue of shaming other people. That's why there are a lot of like, gossip and body image. And I think there's just this image for girls, particularly in an all-girls school, that you have to be so perfect, so proper and prim and conservative. The moment that someone has like a a tiny flaw, other girls are so quick to point it out. I think that might be the biggest issue in an all-girls school.
That's interesting. Well, each gender school, they have their own sets of bullying or sets of issues at hand, right?
But how did you deal with these issues back then?
Personally, I have to admit, it's either I ignore them or I join them. To me, it was almost like we're a pack, diba? Parang wolves, where it's either you're part of the pack or you're not. And I don't want to be the lone wolf, so part of me was always, it's either I just be part of their standing or I'm part of the ones who were hunt. I'm sure a lot of my batchmates also feel a sense of guilt, at least when they see it happening. Because, when even if you don't do anything, it's almost like you're part of it as well. If they fight this guy or they say something about this guy, and if he didn't do anything, you kind of feel bad just looking at the guy, right? I still approach these men, right? Those guys who are victimized, etc. When those who I know I can be genuinely friends with. It was part of my way of trying to forgive myself for ignoring him or not doing anything to help him out or whatever. So that was just how I dealt with it. Either I joined them or ignore them or tried to be their friends. To some of them, at least. I can't say I'm a hero. That's just my way of trying to forgive myself for not doing anything.
The whole issue with high school, or maybe even in general, is this issue, I think, of trying to fit in. I think that was also how I dealt with my issues back then in high school. If there was something going on, it was either I don't say anything about it or I just comply.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in doing that, right, you kind of take a stand in what is going on because you don't want to take a stand.
That's true. I mean, that's exactly what I feel. Yeah, and now that you mention it, it's like high school is so complicated. I was just thinking if more adult supervision could provide more intimate advice and intimate interaction with the students. Maybe if they felt they were more approachable, we could have asked them these things, right? Because these guys are the ones who are more experienced and knowledgeable about the things that we're experiencing. For example, bullying, where maybe if I trusted my teacher or whoever adult who was in my life back in the day, I guess there was a lack of explanation to why we're doing certain things in school. I could have asked, why do these things happen? Honestly, this question never came out in high school. Why do we bully or condemn another person? Where it's not something that was asked ever. It almost felt like it was normal to see it happen. There was no, why do we even need this to happen question, right? It's almost like the teachers or whoever supervision also felt it was normal. Something I'm wondering now is why did it seem so normal to everyone, not just the students but even the teachers? And was it something that was normal to them when they were growing up as well, that when they became teachers, it's just like, oh, this is just normal, this happens everywhere? I don't know how schools are today. Maybe there's a new standard they uphold, but at least with my experience, it wasn't like that, where you're taught to question everything. Now it's ask what you don't know or else you'll never know. Before it was, even if you don't know it, if it looks normal, just accept it.
You know how we all grow up and we're all so used to things being a certain way. There are issues maybe with how we're supposed to learn. You know how in school, right, we're just taught basic subjects and we're taught to even memorize things, take it as it is. One issue is that we're not taught how to listen, think for myself, learn more critically or more reflectively. And maybe that also affects how we learn even in real life and not just in the books we read. That as long as I memorize something, I could ace my test. And that affected how I saw the world.
Now, actually, now that you mentioned the world, it reminded me of something that might be a factor. I think the Philippines is a very westernized culture. Growing up, we watch a lot of TV. How we acted in school were actually similar to these things I saw on TV, where I saw this guy bully this other guy. You know how the jock would lift the other guy in the locker, give me your lunch money. And then we're like, oh yeah, I can try that in school. And I saw my friend do that as well. Give me your lunch money. I feel like these media were also teaching at least people of our generation, how the people in the States were doing it, or foreign culture was doing it. And we tend to copy what we think is cool or what we like. So maybe that's why these things are slowly becoming normal in our schools. It's because it's what we saw. It can be something that unconsciously promoted a culture of defining what's good and what's okay and what's cool, where the jock always wins and the nerds or the losers were always below, diba? Rather than it being a specific school's fault or a specific culture's fault, it might be a lot of outside factors as well.
I think it's interesting that you point that out, right? Because I think in the Western world, an all boys and all girls school isn't really something we see in media. These issues are persisting in a co-ed school even. Like that's how we see it there. And
yeah,
do you think then that the issues we talked about earlier stem from a same-sex environment, or do you think it also happens in a co-ed environment?
Based on one, the media that we saw, and two, based on the things I hear from my friends, they do come from co-ed schools. When we share experiences, it's almost like they are also doing bullying that we mentioned about earlier, where hey, I name you this, I name you that. They also experience the same thing. I guess what makes us different as a same-sex school is that it's a little amplified than their version, and some of it might be toned down. It seems like they each its own, right? A co-ed school and a same-sex schools, they do have their issues, but there are certain aspects where it's more prevalent than the other. In our experiences, where trying to say something mean to another person is, it might be louder, at least to our school, because a lot of people would just feel the same way. Rather than if you say that in a co-ed school, there might be some women or girls who might fight you on it, like, hey, you can't say that, right? Because that we're all women. But I don't know, because I've never really experienced that in high school. In college, yeah, because people are more open.
I feel like I'm also trying to figure it out. Similar to what you shared, I think that there are other schools out there, even co-ed schools, that experience bullying and issues like gossip or shaming other people. I know of 2 or 3 issues where, for example, if a girl had nudes, it would be the guy who would stay in the school while the girl would get expelled. While I do think that not having exposure to the other gender can amplify that, it doesn't also rid the fact that it exists even in environments where both genders do exist. While asking ourselves if those issues exist in same-sex schools and what we can do about it is like a good question to ask. Maybe the bigger question worth asking is, how can we just stop this culture in general? Because it also exists, right, in co-ed schools. And what can we do to prevent this?
Well, based on what's going on today, there seems to be students or people slowly stepping up, right? They're trying to set a standard na to how a man or a woman should act. I think it's we're in a very sensitive time, and not just in our country, but as a culture, where we're finding ways to specifically say what's right or what's wrong na. I think it's already a good start that people are slowly trying to speak up and trying to bring to light what is not morally right. There might be some things that were super normal back in the day. Let's say one gender can do this while the other gender can't do that. Well, today people are more connected because of the digitalization of technology and everything, right? Social media. So now people can interact to each other, not within their own country. So it helps share different culture and share different perspective in life. And I think that also helped these people speak up on certain issues into public, where either they knowingly or unknowingly realized that they were going to get a lot of backlash for it. But I think that's the main reason why they have the confidence not to speak up on certain issues, versus the people who might be fighting back this backlash were people who weren't as exposed back in the day, diba? Where this is their normal and this is old school culture. This is a culture where this is how I grew up and it was normal. And until today, I still live the same lifestyle. But they have to understand the people who are speaking up are coming from a different generation as well. Culture changes. Before, women weren't allowed to sit in the front of the bus, but now it's so normal. Same with the race, diba? Even now, there's like that Black Lives Matter movement going on. Times are changing and everyone has to adapt to what's better. Just because it was normal before doesn't mean it's right. It's nice to see people speak up. It's nice to see that times are changing, hopefully for the better. And I think even people in our country should adapt as well, because we're known as a third world country for many reasons, diba? For our economy, our infrastructure, our technology. The least we can do now is to change something that can be done without money, which is just moral issues, morality, virtues, values. I feel like if we can fix those, we can actually become a country worthy of competing in an international level. The culture here has been very, I just do what I want to do. That's what I've seen in all boys school or co-ed school, whatever makes me happy. not what is better for everyone.
I think for me, it's also just like two things. The first one, similar to what you shared with me, it's that exposure, right, with other people, other cultures. Because if you think about it, the reality is that there is no world that exists where only boys exist. There is no real world where only Filipinos exist. The reality is that there are really different cultures, there are different genders, there are just different things, and if you only limit yourself to one aspect or one facet of your life, you're never really gonna learn how to deal with other people. And I guess the second thing, this issue of fitting in, there's a difference between fitting in and actually belonging.
Mhm.
And we most of the time fall in this line of fitting in. We just want to adjust to be able to be part of a group, when in fact maybe the culture we should be promoting is a culture of belongingness. Even though I'm not exactly like
The
you,
same.
even though I'm not exactly the same, you can accept me for who I am and I can belong.
Yeah,
And I think that's
really
really,
nice.
diba, parang an important culture to imbibe. And like what you said, these things are free. We don't have to spend so much money on it to be these kinds of people. And ironically, it's like the hardest thing to do.
Yeah, it looks right doesn't mean it's right, diba? Just because it feels right doesn't mean it's right. It's like me saying, "Oh, I hurt this guy. It's okay. He'll just forgive me." No, it's not okay, diba? The first step is understanding yourself better, is knowing what's right and what's wrong. That's what makes us human. We have the ability to discern what's right and wrong. And if you can't even discern what's right and wrong, you're like an animal na lang, diba? You just move through instinct. We have instinct, diba? But we also have the ability to think. So sometimes I think people should think more before acting.
I think it's so interesting, right? How we started off this conversation on how we would blindly follow a certain norm to now where, in a way, like we're more aware. We try to reflect on things and discern on things. And how would you say that switch happened for you? How did you unlearn the things that you learned to be able to become the person like who you are now?
What's nice is that why we miss the days in high school or grade school. It wasn't merely the fact that we get to hang out with each other every day, but it also was the fact that it was almost like we had nothing to lose. Where the school will do their best to take care of us. We'll figure out a way to pass our grade, and then that's good. Versus going to college and realizing that your teachers in college, I felt like they cared for me mga 20% of the time. It's harder to talk my way out of it. If you fail, you fail, and that's your fault. It's a little bit more brutal. I mean, it's normal dapat, but those who are sheltered, I have to admit, I was one of the sheltered ones, diba, growing up. It's different, diba? So those were things, the reality checks that happened to me. Because going to college, you realize that, okay, after college, I have to earn money na. I have to survive. I can't rely on my parents anymore. It's now also mixed genders, right? And now that I'm meeting everyone, you're starting to hear different cultures also. Is that really normal for you guys over there? And it makes you reflect also back into your own school where, why is it in my school it's like this? And in your school, it's like that. It's almost like you left the path, diba? And you have to survive on your own. So being on your own, you were forced to open up your mind. You're forced to open your eyes to different things, or else you'll be alone. The people that in high school where you thought they were not worth speaking with, then you meet them in college, and then you're like, wait a minute, you're actually really cool. Why didn't I speak to you more back in the day? And it's because I was so close-minded. And then when I opened up myself, where I realized the world is so big, that I should experience it wholeheartedly rather than close myself in a certain false positive norm. Those are the things I had to teach myself, at least, where I had to teach myself to be more open and more honest with what I like and what I dislike. I had to be more open to talking to people that are different than me. Because in high school, everyone has to be the same. But if you don't follow these sets of rules, you're an anomaly. In college, it's the weirder you are, the more interesting you are. I can't be a sheep. I want to be a peacock.
I like your analogy. Openness is something that really changes in college. From being in an all-girls school to finally switching to that environment, I was surprised that, hey, when you come from a very restricted school, you just think of a guy as a enemy or a lover. You don't see them as a friend. I think that's like how it kind of was for me growing up.
I can relate now that you mentioned it.
Right? And then when I came into college, realizing that the world exists with both boys and girls, I was like, hey, parang it's pretty cool that I can be comfortable around people. That doesn't just apply to gender. It applies to like other things that you share, like different cultures, all of the differences. and embracing the similarities that go along with it. And I think the second thing, which you also shared earlier, was this whole thing on adversity. How in high school, we're so well taken care of. You know, like our parents want us to succeed in life. Our teachers want us to get into the best colleges. I think there's so much importance also to that feeling of adversity, because that allows us to, you know, get those reality checks and say, hey, this is not just the bubble that I'm living in, right? There's so much more to the world outside.
Okay, that's super interesting. With what's going on today, I've seen at least news, when I've read the articles, a lot of people can quickly state a single issue as the main problem. There are a lot of people kasi that are most likely not gonna like it, diba? And it's also okay, but before stating something and pointing out a single issue, the best thing to do is really to talk about it as a group, have an open discussion about it instead of trying to point fingers ASAP. That's what I like about what we're doing now is we're talking about it, we're discussing it rather than trying to point at things. Maybe these people aren't really angry with what you said. It's more of you didn't really ask for my opinion before you said it. That's why I'm mad. It's like you see two of your friends fighting, then you side with one. The other one will feel mad because you didn't hear him out, and maybe that's how a lot of people would have felt with backlashes. Is where why would you point at this specific issue without really going deeper and asking both sides or hearing both sides of the story? My experience is that I'm lucky and blessed that my parents would be able to fly me abroad, so I was able to open myself up to a lot of cultures early. I can also see the perspective of those who are here, diba, in Manila. They see a problem, and then if they're not being asked about it, it's like what you're saying is wrong na kasi we didn't really talk about it before you posted it or something. I think that's why a lot of people had that backlash kasi I feel it all. I kind of feel it din where you write something without even asking people who's gone through the exact same experience as you. You might be jumping into conclusion about something without talking about it. And I feel like that's a big issue with people now. They know what the problem is. It's just that they're stating it too quickly. And I think people should be creating a more inclusive environment rather than a debate environment. But I'm not saying that there's no issue at all. I'm sure there are issues talaga. It's just that it's better to work together to fix them than to blame it agad. Cancel this school, or dapat wala nang ganyan na school, or dapat this should be completely closed off. So it's really scary for those who experience it kasi they might feel that, Eddie, what will the next generation feel? They'll never experience the things I experienced kasi there are bad, but there are also a lot of good. Maybe that's what they're worried about. If you cancel this, they're not going to experience the good side of the things I experienced as well. I believe talaga everyone is inherently good. They just genuinely want to relive the culture they did kasi it was maybe the golden years of their lives. Might be the best years of their lives. So there's a lot of things we don't know.
You know, cancel culture, I think, is like a whole other thing on its own, right? This importance of discourse. I wouldn't know for this issue in particular. Probably there are a lot of interviews that have been taken place as well. We don't know, right? How things have been said or have been done. But I think the moment that maybe something is posted or an article is posted, other people are also quick to think that they just shared whatever they thought or they felt. At the same time, people don't know the behind the scenes of the author who wrote the article. We don't know that maybe that person also, I guess, talked to different people beforehand before sharing whatever it is that she shared. And I think maybe that's just like the whole issue, right? Or the whole concept of social media. People think that we just share whatever our thoughts are, and the moment we post it with our names on it, that's it. That's just like our thought, our opinion. And people are also quick to backlash that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I guess like the question is more of how can we encourage more of this kind of discourse? The importance of making sure that people talk about it in a way that is safe to everyone, that they don't feel like they're being attacked. I think we all have good intentions. The people who are backlashing a certain person, genuine and good intentions there. And same goes for the people who write these articles. Like they have good intentions, but I guess the means of how they express it is different from the other. And that's where like the conflict arises.
Yeah, it's where the we need to learn to understand each other really becomes important, from close-knit to really open-minded culture. Reality is tough, you know, when especially if you're gonna be coming from a really, really sheltered environment. You really need to experience the hardship. Yeah, so that's just my final thoughts on our topic at least.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Ains.